Good morning, Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy. Just another fun day as we tackle taxes, and there's a lot of news out there today, but we're going to focus today primarily on cancellation of debt. So you have debt that's canceled, and then the IRS comes and tries to tax you on it when you're at your most vulnerable. That's going to be the topic for today. And again, it affects a lot of people going through really tough times. You lose a home, you have credit card, other debts canceled, and then all of a sudden are written off. You get a nice hefty bill from the IRS. So again, this is something that hits a lot of people. It's something to be mindful of and be aware of. And believe it, even when you have debt canceled with the federal government, you can still get taxed on it by the IRS. So we're going to get into that in depth today, and we will be back shortly after the break. Pardon me. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy here on, pardon me, on smartmoneychannel.com or smartmoneyculture.tv. And, again, thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast. We definitely appreciate you watching. And, again, hopefully this is informative for you. So, a couple big things in the news. I'm going to touch on one thing that's not as big of an emergency, but I want to talk about this Baltimore bridge and how that's affecting people. But first of all, we're going to deal with the news topic. This is from the IRS. So again, this is something I've mentioned before. May 17th is the deadline to file your 2020 return. If you haven't filed it, that's the deadline to file your return and get a refund. And part of this is through COVID funds. They're giving everybody, I believe it's $1,000, and if you owe taxes, that $1,000 still goes to your pocket. You should set up something to deal with your taxes, but again, the only way to avoid filing that return is to hold your nose for another 3 years, and hopefully they don't find you in that 3-year period. But again, if you just file your return, you'll get $1,000. From that COVID relief funds, and the same things for 2021. So again, the filing deadline in 2021 was extended out to May 17th. And that's when you would have filed your 2020 return. So again, that's the deadline to get a refund for that year. If you have any questions about that, talk to your local tax preparer or CPA, and you can get that submitted and in sooner rather than later. And that there's an estimated $940,000. This is an article from the Associated Press. 940,000 unclaimed tax refunds, and again, that's so the average refund is around 932. But again, it goes into some details. But the main thing is May 17th. Get your 2020 return in. If you haven't, get that free money, all free. For COVID relief funds, and you'll get that refund in your pocket. It won't go to pass through taxes. It'll go to directly to you. Now, it's interesting that talking about the Baltimore Bridge, and I've got an article. I mean, there's all kinds of articles now, but I think this was a really good one from Live Now. Actually, it's a local Fox channel. And there was a New York Times one on it, but again, you had to go through some steps to actually see the article. But the disaster relief, and that's what I want to talk about here. So I'm going to go ahead and share this article. It should share. The program's going a little slow right now. There we go. And this article, again, talks about what does it mean. There's a lot of people that live and commute in this area. And this is what typically happens when you have an emergency. So again, this has a lot to do with the IRS. Again, this just kind of shows not only did this section of bridge get destroyed, a lot of it collapsed. Now it's blocking the harbor and the channel. So again, this is a huge, huge issue, and that container ships still need to come in and out. And that you have this bridge that's collapsed. It's not only blocking and preventing vehicles from going over the bridge, but it's also preventing all the shipping from coming into this harbor. So all of that has to be rerouted, sent to other harbors. There's limited capacity. So again, it becomes a huge economic problem for this area. So Maryland Governor Wes Moore declared a state of emergency. So does the Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott, and they should. These are all, I mean, again, it won't affect everyday lives, but what it will affect is all the people that are affected by this economically. And kudos to the Biden administration for jumping on this. And again, he came out and said that, again, the federal government's just going to pay for it. Eventually, it should be some kind of liability for any parties at fault. But getting this done, taking care of this is what our economy needs. Again, the Port of Baltimore generates $3.3 billion, and personal income supports 15,000 jobs. Again, that doesn't even mention all the goods that flow into it, food stuff. I mean, food, just normal articles that people purchase and use on a regular basis. Having a whole port shut down because a bridge is destroyed is really catastrophic. And people in that area, the Baltimore and outlying regions, are going to see the ripple effect for this for quite some time until it's repaired. So, right now they're trying to save people, but people, about 20 cars, it was estimated, went directly into the river when this happened as well. So there was a loss of life here as well. And again, that's remain in effect for 30 days, but the main reason they're doing that is to get federal funds. And that's exactly what should be happening, in my opinion. So President Biden came out yesterday and spoke and said, we're going to get people right in there. The Army Corps of Engineers. We need to get the old bridge, remove the old bridge from the causeway so that they can start shipping again, and also rebuild the bridge because again, there's a huge amount of traffic that goes over it. So going with this, expect to have a disaster declaration from the IRS, and expect to, maybe you'll be able to file your tax returns later. You might have some penalties and interest forgiven during this period. But the main thing is to get federal funds in there to fix this major bridge, clear out the old bridge so that shipping can continue. As quickly as they want to jump on this, it's not going to be a quick fix. So again, it's hard to overstate the impact that this is going to have on this entire region. And again, this is why, it's a tragedy. So I was talking to someone the other day, yesterday, in Argentina, and he said, "Oh, the bridge collapsed. I heard about that too." Not only was it national news, this was international news. People heard about this all across the world because it was such a big deal and has such a huge impact. Part of it is just, again, the news and the pictures were pretty horrifying. And the whole bridge collapsing like that is news that went internationally. So want to pivot a little bit today and talk about our topic for the day, which is canceled debt. And that sounds like a great thing, that you have cancellation of debt, that debt is canceled, debt is forgiven. You don't have to worry about it. And that sounds like a wonderful thing. This hit a lot of people back in the mortgage crisis of 2008-9. A lot of people did short sales. And there are still people out there doing short sales. There are people that have tax debt forgiven, or not tax debt. They have credit cards forgiven. A lot of debt resolution companies are out there where they negotiate directly with credit cards, with medical debt, with vehicle loan repossessions. This is something that really affects people that are struggling. People that they don't have the best income, they don't have financial stability, and they're doing their best often to negotiate, employ companies to negotiate to try to reduce these debts. A lot of it means that a lot of the times what they're doing is that they are letting the debts go into default. And with time, when the debts default, then they can negotiate some kind of deal. Hell, I'll settle, I'll pay you, half of it or 2/3 of it, and you forgive the rest. The problem is when these debts are forgiven, either through a short sale of the home, if you have a mortgage, if you have other debt that is canceled or forgiven, that is treated as income by the IRS. So again, a classic example of this are when people do short sales on homes, and it can really hurt people. So people get cancellation of debts all the time. They don't know about them. What should you do? It's called a 1099-C is what's issued. Once you get a 1099-C, first of all, most people don't understand that it counts as income. Why does it count as income? So going back in the history a little bit, people back in the 70s and early 80s, until they closed a lot of these loopholes, they would use tricks like this. So they would, they would get very fancy with their numbers. They had fancy attorneys, and so they would set up losses to offset gains and then have the debt canceled. I mean, they played all kinds of funny games with finances. And when the IRS closed all these loopholes, one of the ways to close these loopholes, every rule has, it's just like on the playground. Every rule is because someone was abusing a rule. So there are a lot of people, mainly the rich, fighting loopholes because the tax rate was so high, 70% or so, more or less. And then because of that, and people being very creative and looking for every loophole, a lot of these rules are put into place to discourage that and prevent that. And it largely was successful, but that also means that the people that are still actually incurring these losses get taxed. When they finally get a little bit of relief, they get taxed on that forgiven debt. So we're going to talk about how that impacts your tax returns, how that can create balances, and how to avoid it. When doesn't it count as a cancellation of debt? And one area that it does count, a big thing here is that a lot of people are going through, a lot of people took EIDL loans to the SBA loans. And that is also, if you have those kinds of debts forgiven, even private student loans, that can create the same issue. So we'll be right back in just a couple minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast here at Taxes Made Easy. So I hope you didn't just fall asleep when I talked about cancellation of debt. I mentioned the topic for today. It affects a lot of people. It affects a lot of people in not the best way. So again, it surprises people when they finally get something written off, they get a break, and then all of a sudden the IRS comes calling. So basically what happens, it's where a debt is written off. Someone's no longer going to pursue you. So if you have a repossession, if you have credit card, medical debt that's written off, bank loans that are written off, basically when the creditor says, okay, I'm not going to come after you anymore for this debt, but to get it written off as a business loss. So to get credit, so if you're an employer, if you're a business and you've been trying to get somebody to pay, they don't pay, that's a business loss. And you can't claim that on your tax return unless you issue the individual a 1099-C or cancellation of debt. So if you write off a debt as a business, that's why they issue these. It's why they have to issue it, because they can't write it off as a loss until they issue this. So again, um, it's not businesses just trying to be mean. They need the write off on their end, or they get hit for it. And this is how they show the IRS that this debt was written off, and they get, they can show on their financial statement and balance their own books. So that's why you get these 1099-Cs, cancellation of debts. Now, when you get a 1099-C, I'm going to talk about the practicality of it to start, and then we'll just kind of dive into some of the more detailed information. First of all, when you get the 1099-C, it needs to be included in your tax return. It is a form of income. Doesn't sound like it. You might be very upset by it. It can really bother a lot of people, but it absolutely needs to be included. And it's reported to the IRS. It's on your wage and income transcripts. They see it. The states see it. You need to include it on your tax returns. If you don't, it can definitely hurt you, and we don't want that. So what happens if you get a 1099-C later on? Well, I did a show just the other day all about amending your tax returns. If you get information later on, you can amend the tax return to include it. What if you don't agree with it? Well, you can dispute it. But again, when someone issues a 1099-C, just like a 1099, it's very hard to dispute those. You can contest it, you can appeal through the IRS, but the IRS takes the information they get. As long as they're getting it from a business, they don't tend to fight it that much. You can claim fraud. And again, just like identity fraud, when you claim fraud, if someone's fraudulent, issuing you fraudulent 1099-Cs, which do happen, then it becomes a dispute between the person committing the fraud and you, and the IRS is kind of caught in the middle. So they'll just, for the time being, I would file a return, contest it, maybe label this as fraud, but then you need to go directly after who's issuing the 1099-C and try to get them to address that. Sometimes you have to talk to a civil attorney to go after someone fraudulently filing a 1099 or a 1099-C, and sometimes even a W-2 that's issued erroneously. So there are ways to combat this when it's done in error or by fraud. I spoke to someone that they worked for a company and they messed up. They issued a W-2s to them, doubling their wages for a specific year. Again, it happens more than you would think. They had to go and contest it with their employer, and they actually reversed it. They corrected it. Their HR department corrected it. But then they did it again the next year, and she was no longer employed. She quit working with them because of problems like this. But once she quit working the HR department was much less inclined to help her correct these issues. So again, it becomes a battle. It becomes a fight, and there's no easy solution often, which is a frustrating thing, because you're trying to get this company to fix their mistake, and the longer it goes, the less likely they'll be inclined to fix it. I've seen investment companies where someone had mental issues, they were having seizures and didn't even know it. Years down the road, these issues popped up and he wasn't even aware of what was happening. And he was investing through a company, and he got issued, income, but because time had elapsed, he had a very difficult time fixing it. So there are a few ways to address that and look at it, but that's getting into the weeds a bit. So just want to focus on, first of all, what is cancellation of debt? And so basically, when you borrow money and you're legally obligated to repay the fixed debt. So if you just borrow money from a friend, we're not talking about that. It's where there's some kind of legal obligation to pay this. and then the debt is either forgiven or discharged, so it's wiped out for less than the full amount. So I'm going to share this IRS article real quick, and this is where a lot of the information comes from for today, and just kind of explain it, because again, when you have IRS articles, they can be difficult to understand. So the 1099-C, cancellation of debt, and I'm just going to show you a copy of it. This is exactly what it looks like. So void or corrected. To avoid is to back it out. Corrected is we changed it. But again, this is all it is. It says creditor's name, debtor's name, and address, date, amount of the debt discharged, and interest. And so again, it's just a very basic form. When you get this form, again, it's a little bit easier to see there. You know you have to include it on your tax return. So again, just be very aware of that. So you have to report it on your 1040 and your state returns, because again, this gets reported to your state as well. There's a big difference between if it's secured by property and if the property is seized, it's treated as a sale. So you have to then worry about any profit from a property that is seized in foreclosure and sold. So if you own a property and you owe $400,000 and they seize it and sell it for $300,000, the bank just ate a $100,000 loss. That is counted as a cancellation of debt. Now, this has been such an issue. We're going to talk about exceptions for housing, but again, it goes into examples for boats, and it gets a little bit more complicated. They talk about adjusted basis, etc. But again, there's a whole publication here, section 4681. Basically, if you have a cancellation of debt, canceled debts, foreclosures, repossessions, abandonments, get a tax professional. When I share a lot of this information, it is a public service to inform you of what's out there. This is not intended to train someone as a CPA or as a bookkeeper or as a tax preparer. And if you go to a tax preparer and they aren't familiar with this, or it seems like it's a little over their heads, this is one of the areas where you really should go find an experienced tax preparer or CPA. And I have plenty of experienced tax preparers that I work for, and they just never bothered to get their CPA license. They've been doing it 20, 30 years. No problem. I'll send them most work. But if you go and you talk to someone and they don't know, or they feel hesitant a little bit. Again, I just had someone just the other day, sold a home, went to TurboTax, owed $130,000. And I said, look, I could help you. We could do an offer and compromise. But they're, again, very poor. And so I said, look, why don't we look if we can't amend your returns and wipe out the debt first. So again, that person that used TurboTax, true story. If you have anything like this cancellation of debt, a lot of these more involved topics that I'm talking about on my shows, at least get a second opinion. Go to a tax preparer or CPA. If you don't know someone, we refer excellent CPAs and tax preparers across the country. And you can always reach out to us at 520-485-7371. We do not get any fee sharing. There's no financial benefit to us. The main benefit is that when we help people out, it comes back to us by referrals, or people will share our name as we help people out. But we don't charge for this service to refer people out, nor do we get any financial compensation for the referrals we get out. Now, so here's some exceptions. So if someone a family member loans you $20,000 and then they cancel as a gift, a bequest if you owe somebody and they say in their will or through a trust or inheritance, they say forget that loan, it's a gift now, or it's an inheritance, etc. Now you have to be careful about gifts with family members. So any gift over $17,000 is considered taxable to the giver. So the person that is giving the gift has to watch out for gift taxes. You can give so much, I believe it's 17,000 right now, without any tax consequences. But if someone is canceling debt or just giving money or canceling loans for more than 17,000, they have to watch out for that. That creates a tax issue for them. So, qualified student loan forgiveness. If you are working for the public defender, there are plenty of provisions out there to have student loan forgiven for working in the public sector. Student loan discharges, so only certain ones for this time period. So a lot of this is still going through the courts. So there's a lot of consequences here to this idea that they're just going to forgive student loans. The Supreme Court has even said that the Biden administration could not do this, could not just wave a magic wand and say we forgive student loans. There's contracts in place. I mean, there's a lot of laws, that stand in the way of just an executive order. So be very wary of thinking you're going to walk away free from student loan discharges. A lot of that's probably going to end up hurting people in the end. Received or forgiven under repayment assistance programs, so IBA programs. Canceled debt, again, a cash basis taxpayer. Talk to a CPA about that. There's some exclusions as well as a qualified purchase reduction. So there are ways to avoid having a cancellation of debt income. But one of the things that it's important to know that there are clear exceptions to this. And I was mentioning before the break, the SBA loans. If you have SBA loans, EIDL, PPP loans, and then you go in, there's a process through the Treasury Department, it's called the BFS, Bureau of Fiscal Services, where you can do an offer and compromise. Sounds great. If you qualify, you can wipe out a good portion of these SBA loans that you're personally liable for. The problem with that is because it's not an offer and compromise with the IRS, it creates a 1099-C. So it creates a cancellation of debt. And so if you go in and you settle with an offer and compromise with other departments of the government, not the IRS, then you would get to pay taxes on what you were forgiven. So if you go in and you pay $20,000 to settle $80,000, now you had $60,000 in gain. That will count as income for that year. So that drives up, can often put you into the higher tax bracket. It can cause a lot of problems with your tax return. So just be aware of that when you go in. So here are some of the things where if you file for bankruptcy, debt discharged in bankruptcy does not cause cancellation of debt. Plain and simple. You can prove that you're insolvent, which is the number 2 issue, and this is what we're going to really focus on moving forward. If you can qualify for bankruptcy, tax debt can be discharged in bankruptcy. There's quite a few other things that can be, student loans can't, SBA loans can be discharged in bankruptcy, but again, this is a new thing to have all these EIDL loans. Child support can't be discharged in bankruptcy. So there are things that can and can't be discharged in bankruptcy, but anything that is discharged in bankruptcy gets settled. And I spoke to someone that was this week that filed for bankruptcy, did it themselves, did it successfully, but they didn't include a lot of the debt that could have been included in the bankruptcy. So they didn't include their tax debt that was old enough. And so now they have to deal directly with the IRS. So that's why it always helps. Even if you think you can figure it out, go talk to a professional, get a free consultation, and they can help explain to you when is bankruptcy a good option and when it isn't. So again, there's an entire form that we're going to talk to. It's down here. I've already looked at it. A Form 982 for if you're insolvent or indebted. So this includes farm indebtedness, which is a specific exclusion here, real property, business indebtedness, and then you have what we were talking about historically, real property, residence indebtedness. When you do a short sale, this is such a huge problem that Congress acted, and so there's an exclusion through January 2026, which means that historically, whenever you had a discharge, they would change this. But the market crash, the housing market crash of 08, 09 was so big, Congress acted to save a lot of people, but you have to apply for it. You have to go through the steps to qualify for it. If you don't, then you're still going to get hit with this. So again, be aware of your rights. If you have any kind of complications with your tax returns or what's going on, talk to a CPA, talk to a tax professional. If you don't know who to talk to, give us a call. You can reach out to us at 520-485-7371, guardiantaxlaw.com, or info@guardiantaxlaw.com. And those are the best ways to get a good referral to someone that knows how to handle your case, your taxes, and do it right. For me, that's one of the frustrating things, especially when you have people that don't have a lot of income and they pay for a tax professional and they think because they don't have a lot of income, they can't afford a CPA. They can't afford to have someone do it right. And they usually get burned. And then they have to come and hire someone like me. But we can usually get that fixed by amending the returns and saving them a lot of money in the end. So don't be shy about calling and getting good advice, quality advice. And spending $100 or so more dollars can save you thousands in the end. We're coming up on another hard break, so thank you again for watching, and we'll be back shortly. Welcome back, everybody, to Taxes Made Easy. I've got a Forbes article here that I thought was quite good and very much on point. So this is, again, it's published about a year ago, but still very applicable. Talking about taxes, they almost always apply to cancel debt, but there's some exceptions here. And he really kind of goes through this, explains it in English, or easier to understand than reading IRS publications. So unless it's a gift, it's taxable. So again, it talks about cancellation of debt, or COD for short. And it kind of explains it a little bit more about why this is canceled. Loans that are forgiven as gifts aren't taxable. But again, you have to worry about the $17,000, the gift tax exclusion. Here it talks about the exception on the mortgages, which we were getting to. So again, the 2007 financial crisis, which led to the mortgage crisis, excluded as income up to $2 million. And then for currently, it's $750,000 for 21 to 25. This is not automatic, though. I want to be very clear about this, that this is not automatic. You have to apply for this. It has to be approved. And so be aware of your rights. If you do go through some kind of cancellation of debt situation with a mortgage or primary residence, again, they put large exclusions into place as a temporary fix for a big problem. So again, I just want to emphasize that this is not done automatically. Um, Again, so the initial act from 2007 to 10 was extended in 2020, but again, after 2026, this goes away. So again, and excluded debt up to 750,000, which is very generous. It's so high because it's national. You get a lot of people in very expensive areas, New York, San Francisco, some of the most expensive places in the entire country, where 750,000 is not a whole lot when it comes to housing. So again, you have to, when they do write this off, it affects your basis in any sale. So again, this is where you really need to talk to, if you have any kind of real property that gets foreclosed on, et cetera, like that. You might not have a lot of money, but this is where you definitely need to go talk to a CPA or an expert tax preparer to make sure this is done right. So again, this is what it was saying. It's not automatic. You have to form IRS file form 982, and we're going to look at that soon. Section 1082 basis adjustment. So this is basis is a whole nother topic. That's more of a topic for CPAs. I probably will not do a session on that because it's too much in the weeds. Again, it talks about bankruptcy discharges aren't taxable. If you're insolvent, you get a pass. Again, you have to file for that form 982, and we're going to be looking at that in just a short little while here. Disputed debts are different. So again, if you're arguing that the debt wasn't valid, again, this is read narrowly. This isn't a wide open door for people to charge you and just say, oh, well, I dispute the debt and claim that it wasn't valid debt. But if they actually had a legal reasoning for it, again, this has to be done in good faith to qualify for it, and this is based on a case law. And so you have to be, again, this is where it gets very much in the weeds as far as getting this exception. So if you have something that you don't believe was a valid debt, so someone overcharged you, they charged the wrong person, they went after you, and you got that removed, that should not be considered a cancellation of debt, but it has to be invalid debt from the start. Price adjustments, so again, if you bought have the price adjust, and then you, again, I'm not explaining this in detail because it gets very complicated, and this is where if you have these issues, go talk to a CPA or expert tax preparer and make sure that they have this. There's plenty of tax preparers that I would not send these cases to. There are CPAs that I would not send these kinds of cases to. That's just not in their wheelhouse. That's not their specialty. They don't have that kind of expertise. And it doesn't mean they're a bad tax preparer or CPA, but you have to find the right professional for the job. And there's plenty of people that I refer to and do amazing work, and I send work to them all the time. When you get in the weeds like this, I send it to, I'm more choosy about who I send it to. So student loans, when forgiven through traditional programs, our government programs, can be forgiven. But again, March of 2021, they had the American Rescue Plan. This is still, and then President Biden sweeping student debt relief. This is still being litigated. So be very aware of this. It's still being litigated, the cancellation of student loan debt, and the Supreme Court has initially ruled against it. So to be honest, and I'm not trying to get political here, the law is not on President Biden's side here. It's just anybody fighting student loan debt, and that's part of the political calculus here. They look like a big jerk fighting student loan debt for poor students. However, many people, who gets to pay it, the federal government and taxpayers, many of them who did not go to college. So there are people fighting this, and don't be surprised if most of what Biden is offering as student loan forgiveness gets struck down. So be very aware of that, and you might end up with, you might be in a very bad position at that point if it gets struck down and you haven't been paying. Again, when the government comes and tries to help, often they make things worse. So even if it's forgiven by the federal government, California might have to still pay state income tax on it. So again, there's deductible interest. This is Be Alert Form IRS Form 1099-C. This is what I showed you earlier. It's very important that you be aware of this form. When you get it, you need to include it in your tax documents. You need to follow up on that. And again, it's very important that you have that form ready to go. So lastly, we're going to go to the Form 982. And I'm going to go ahead and share this form with you. This is for the exclusions due to indebtedness or other reasons. Do I recommend you go out and fill this form by yourself? No. Again, there's a lot of complications here. There's a lot of twists and turns. It's only a one-page form. But again, I highly recommend go and talk to a tax professional, talk to an expert on that, and they can help walk you through that. So again, there are instructions for the form, and this is what's very handy as you go through. It explains what is the purpose of it, how do you fill out the form, and for pretty much every IRS, there's instructions for almost all forms. The problem is that they're talking to tax professionals here. So it can definitely get into the weeds. It can be difficult to understand. And then it talks about qualified principal residence. Here it goes into non-business debt. And that's how you fill it out. But again, it just tells you where to put the information. It doesn't tell you if you qualify and what to be concerned about. So again, this goes line by line and explains each line how to apply for and fill out the form. Just because you submit the form, I'm going to step away here for a moment. Just because you submit the form does not mean that you automatically get approved. No. So you have to file your taxes, you have to include the form, and you have to make sure it's accepted. Otherwise, the government will treat it as income. So again, this creates a conundrum where a lot of times you file your forms, just kind of forget about it. On this, I would follow up, make sure that they actually receive it and accept it as an exception, that you're not going to get taxed on this income. So you have to report the income on your tax return, but file the form and say, look, here's the income, I'm aware of it, I'm reporting it, but I don't think I should be taxed on it for these reasons. And the IRS has to accept the form. So it's no guarantee. They have to look at it. It will be reviewed and verified before it's actually accepted. So be aware of that it's not a gimme. That's why working with the tax professional here on these complicated issues is so important. I just want people to be aware of that there are exceptions. There are ways to get around this cancellation of debt. You just have to do it right and have good representation to be able to handle that. So again, cancellation of debt is something, it happens enough. People get surprised by it. People get blindsided by it. And it gets issued to them, and then all of a sudden it pops up on their return. or they get a notice of deficiency because they didn't include it, and they get hit with increased penalties and interest. So include that information when you file a return. In summary, when you get it, don't ignore it. If you don't know what it is, give us a call. Contact a local CPA tax preparer that has experience dealing with this and knows the exclusions and the rules. And these forms, again, they're going to be, when we post this on YouTube, they'll have links where you can access some of these forms as well. And again, if you have questions, give us a call, 520-485-7371. Reach out to us through our website, guardiantaxlaw.com, and you can find a lot of this information on the smartmoneyculture.tv, as well as our YouTube channel, where we are also have most of these videos being posted. It's a lot of information, and this is a fairly technical show today. But again, people get these 1099-Cs, ask, get informed. So want to move on just a little bit. Had a question today about ACA penalties. And so that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow is ACA penalties. How does the Affordable Care Act, or more commonly known, or also known as Obamacare taxes, still affect taxpayers today? The penalties aren't in the news like they used to be. It's not mandatory to have health insurance anymore, unless your state has mandated it. Some states have, like California. But at the same time, a lot of people are being affected by the ACA, and there are more and more people relying on the exchanges. So these are still definitely issues that affect people. They hurt people. And so that's why, again, talking about the ACA and penalties and how they can affect you and your family are big issues today. So that's going to be a topic for tomorrow. Again, I had one lady, she called up and she had moved to the U.S., didn't understand the laws, and when she reported her income, they asked, well, what's your income? She said, well, Social Security, that's all I have. That's all I get. However, she had savings. She had assets. And she ended up living on a lot more than that, but she didn't understand the program. She didn't understand the forms and how she was supposed to report her income. She could have paid for her own private insurance and saved money. She got subsidized insurance. And when it hit her at the end of the year, she was very healthy, never went to the doctor or anything like that, but she ended up getting hit for about $15,000 to $20,000 in penalties and fees due to the fact that she used the exchanges when she didn't qualify for it. She didn't understand that she didn't. And one of her sons was the one that told her, oh, you have to sign up for health insurance. You have to do that. And she's like, I would have taken the penalty. I would have, I could have paid privately for my own health care, whatever. I could have done it other ways. So what we're going to talk about tomorrow is not only the ACA, but alternatives to health insurance out there. And there's a lot of information. There's a lot of alternatives for individuals and families. And again, a lot of times ACA exchanges are the best way to go right now, the state exchanges. And again, it really depends on that. So again, it can be a little bit of a hot potato now. It's not so much a political hot potato now. But I want to focus on how it affects real families, affects people, and how you can plan for still providing health insurance and coverage for your family, and some of the options that are available today, because there have been quite a few options that have sprung up. So the main topic, cancellation of debt, we covered that pretty thoroughly. If you have questions, again, give us a call. But again, want to thank everybody for watching live or on rebroadcast. It's always a fun to come and share this information with everyone, and look forward to another great day, and be safe out there, people.